All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anthony Antoine, joined by Tom Zizka. And Tom, we are talking about a huge topic that will impact every single person here in the country, this longshoreman strike, which is just hours away by all accounts.
It is. So this is the International Longshoremen's Association. They are at the end of a 6-year contract affecting Gulf Coast and East Coast ports. 36 locations, Port of Houston among the top 10
Right.
in the country. And when they go on strike, and it's all likelihood that they will at the stroke of midnight tonight, all commerce will stop.
And when we say all commerce, we mean furniture, food, like all of that is included here. And that, when we talk about inflation, that being an issue now, the longer this thing continues, we can have a serious problem on our hands.
So, and there's a big question how long it will last, and we'll get into that because there is a lot of speculation over, first of all, whether, yes, it will, and how long. 1 to 2 weeks probably is what I'm hearing, but these ports, these East and Gulf Coast ports, comprise more than half of the containerized, those shipping containers, that's what we're talking about, imports coming into the country.
Right. And we are talking about 36 facilities across 14 different ports here, East and Gulf Coast. That is a lot of freight and commodity.
From Brownsville, Texas to Maine.
Yeah, that is a lot of ground to cover. All right, so if you guys aren't familiar, if you haven't been paying attention or you're just kind of bringing yourself in the loop, let's give you a little bit of background here. So what are the sticking points for these two major sides? All right, first up, neither side has publicly spoken about the wages in particular, but it really comes down to wages and also automation. And I thought that was also an interesting part of the conversation as well.
Yeah, so the union, they want more money.
Right.
They've not had, their last contract had basically about $1 a year extra for 6 years annually. So over the course of their contract, $6 an hour.
Right.
The West Coast dock workers just settled a strike late last year. They got a significant pay bump, and the differential between the two is almost $20 an hour.
And that is huge.
It is.
If you're working on the East Coast and you see your colleagues on the West Coast making that much money, that obviously there will definitely be an issue there for you.
They are saying, pay me. Now, you note that neither side is saying exactly how much money they are asking for or offering. About 40% increase is what the Maritime Alliance has offered, roughly. And the dock workers want roughly $5 an hour for each of the 6 years.
All right, so that's what we're looking at here, $5 a year.
And then automation.
For 6 years, and then automation.
Yes.
Right.
Basically, robots controlling access into the port, robots unloading the containers, and the longshoremen say, that's got to be humans, that's got to be job security. We can't let machines take over. They point to things like the auto industry, where robots are everywhere. And the argument they say at the time was that would reduce costs. They say, no, when's the last time you paid less for a car?
Yeah.
That's what the longshoremen are saying right now.
And also we've seen some of this conversation around when we talk about labor, even in the railroad industry. Some of this has also been some important conversations here. All right, so let's jump into some of the content we have here for you. We're going to start here with Fox's Brooke Taylor. So she's covering the strike here from Seabrook to give us some insight. Brooke? Here, Brooke.
On Brooke's story, talking about, and now I'm getting all of that audio in my ear, so if you in the control room can fix that. So getting to my notes here, we have so many experts in this particular area around the Houston area. So you are also hearing everything that we shouldn't be hearing. All right, so we'll take that out of our ear. We have so many experts here in the Houston area. This is a supply chain issue primarily for kind of the overview. And that's a kind of a terminology that we didn't pay attention to Like prior to the pandemic, for example, supply chain, whatever the heck is that? Now we all know, right?
Now we all know what it is. And, you know, when you're talking about the supply chain, too, one of the things that kind of jumped out at me when you talk about the numbers here, because one of the things the union is saying, like, hey, these shippers, they made billions of dollars in profits over the course of the pandemic here. So when you're making all of that money, they would like to see some of those dollars trickle down to the average worker. So it's definitely a point of contention here. In fact, they said between 2020 and 2023, the shipping rates soared during the pandemic to the tune of these companies making $400 billion.
Yes. They'd like to see a portion of that profit go back into the pockets of the people they say who did the work. Let's talk about supply chain. I want to turn to Margaret Kidd. She's from the University of Houston. She's a supply chain expert that I speak to frequently about a variety of topics. We're in an era of globalization. You know, everything goes everywhere from all over the world. So we depend on a lot of that stuff coming into the United States. We import a lot of stuff. Of course, we export stuff as well. She tells me that the ports, and I want to listen to this, are just essential to keeping the economy running. Take a listen.
In the world of globalization, ports play a critical role, with over 90% of cargo moved by water at some point. So ports, whether it's Port of Houston or Port of New York or Port of Savannah, they are economic engines for their local regions and for the country. Locally, I mean, just as an estimate, the port complex overall probably provides up to 1.5 million jobs with port-related activities. So they're economic engines at the end of the day. In addition to providing all the goods that we use as Americans, whether it's at the grocery store or at the mall or at the car dealership. It's interesting when you look at the West Coast, there's a history of work stoppages over time. I can say that on a Gulf Coast perspective, there's a very positive working relationship with labor. The last strike was in 1977, and while it lasted 45 days, one needs to reflect on, you know, where was globalization in 1977? It certainly wasn't where it is today. So the impact of 36 ports running from Brownsville to Maine closing operations for whether it's a short period or an extended period is going to have an impact on the U.S. economy. I think the two biggest concerns are wages and the impact of automation at ports. We know that the West Coast resolved their labor dispute with about a 32% increase. So, you know, there's a little bit of a precedent set there. But at the same time, labor has a reasonable argument to have a wage increase and participate in the record profits that were generated during COVID for these ocean carriers. They were first-line workers, on call 24/7, regardless of weather. And I think they have a solid argument. On the other hand, their argument about automation is a little bit tricky. I mean, we all understand none of us want to be replaced by a machine, but we really need to think about policy instruments for workforce development and training for new economy skills, so high-tech skills. If we look overall at the U.S. port system, it is drastically behind Europe and Asia in terms of implementing technology, automation, digitization. So ultimately, if we look at this whole global supply chain, we are somewhat of the weak link because we have not used technology. So we'd like to think American ingenuity is alive and well. The port sector has some catch-up to do. There won't be any cargo moving out of these ports because they'll be closed. It's going to take some time, but I think eventually the president, who has been reluctant to intervene and said he wouldn't, I think that the Biden administration would step in if we get in within a couple of weeks. I think the U.S. economy can't afford this type of closure.
When does John and Jane Doe notice the effect of this?
I think it's possible within a couple of weeks, or I'd say 3 to 6 weeks, you would see some impact. Many retailers front-loaded their peak season cargo. I think where you're going to have some challenges are with fresh fruits and vegetables. We're so dependent on Central America and South America in our local grocery stores. The bad news is if this goes beyond several weeks, there are going to be some serious problems, especially in the manufacturing sector. And I would highlight the automotive sector, which is very dependent on parts coming in from Europe and other parts of the world for the manufacturing. My gut feeling is we have an election in 45 days, and I do not see this extending for a long period. I think if it does happen, it will be short-lived.
Exactly how long it will last and the whole total effect, and how I'm getting serious, putting on the reading glasses here so I can see. So the Port of Houston has almost $39 billion of container traffic every single year. It's kind of small potatoes in comparison to something like New York, New Jersey, which does a vastly larger percentage of container traffic. But we've got solar panels, machinery and tools, automobiles. I don't know if you've ever been over there and you've seen the big lots of Audi and Volkswagens. Yeah. European stuff comes in here, and then electronics as well. So that's what Houston will face, but all those other ports will face other things as well. And the trick of getting all of that cargo, that material, those products and goods from their source on a boat, through a container, to wherever it's going, off the container and off to the customers, it's a very complicated process. And I also spoke with a man by the name of Tim Sensenig, transportation management systems, computer AI type stuff. Yeah. And very, very complex. And he says that this strike is absolutely unavoidable. As you noted, the dock workers want a piece of those record profits that they haven't been able to see. So $2 billion a day in commerce from all of these ports. Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Take a listen to Tim.
So once the ILA hits the picket line, every day that goes by, that's another 4 to 6 days of crippling that has to have a recovery to catch up. At the same point, locally here in Houston, what's going to happen is we have a large amount of chemical and petrochemical manufacturers, and there's no way that you're going to have a lot of empty containers or rail cars sitting around to deal with, for example, plastic resins. There's going to be no place to put them. And basically, day by day, each manufacturer is going to have to look at shutting down the plant.
So when does Jane and John Doe at home start feeling and noticing that this has happened? How long can this proceed before they realize, oh man, this is something?
Well, I think the first impact is going to come right across on the reefer business, on the cold chain. You're going to see it happen right away. From produce going bad quicker because it can't get into the ports, and it can only sit in the reefer for so long. So
what is a reefer?
It is a refrigerated container to move all your perishable stuff, such as vegetables, you name it, fruits, seafood, whatever. So that's only got a certain life. So like even with Dole has their own ships and their own reefers. They go through an aging process. Once they hit a certain cycle, they're not going to make it. It's just not going to make it. But, the good thing is here in Texas, we live next to Mexico. So we can at least offset some of that by trucks. But the problem with the trucks is that we have an 8-to-1 load ratio. For every 8 trucks coming northbound, only 1 goes full on the way down. So we've got a ton of volume coming out of Mexico right now from the nearshoring, and adding more trucks is just going to be very difficult to get the produce here in time versus what's going to happen on the ships, and it's all going to really go bad. We're not driving autonomous vehicles into the port. That's where it would start affecting really the ILA. Anything to do with AI within a technology side of business, like us optimizing something like that, that will not take anything away from the ILA in what the work to do. And quite frankly, if they would get more technology savvy, my belief is they could even demand more salaries for their capability of what they're able to do, and it would not take any labor hours away from them whatsoever.
So his argument again is that there is an opportunity, in his opinion, and Margaret Kidd said much the same thing, to embrace the automation and to be a part of it and to make yourself kind of intrinsic to its development. So say some of these experts. Lots of foreign ports have already been automated.
Right. And that's the thing, right? If you're already seeing that trend, not even necessarily in this industry per se, but other industries have also had to find ways to incorporate automation. It's just, to some degree, that's just kind of the development of any industry. But to what those longshoremen are saying, we've already seen some automation make its way into the industry, and now we don't want that to come here.
Kind of say, I've seen that movie, I don't think it ended well, I don't want to be a part of the sequel.
Exactly.
It's kind of their deal.
It is. And lots of statements we've been seeing here, so we're going to jump into some statements here from both sides. So we're going to start here first with the maritime statement. Again, this is the U.S. Maritime Alliance. This statement came about a week ago, it says there on your screen. It says, despite additional attempts by USMX to engage with the ILA and resume bargaining, we have been unable to schedule a meeting to continue negotiations on a new master contract. We remain prepared to bargain at any time, but both sides must come to the table if we are going to reach a deal, and there is no indication that the ILA is interested in negotiating at this time. That was the statement, again, most recently here from the USMX. Now, in terms of, again, what you were talking about at the beginning, they were, well, at least reportedly, they've offered 40% of an increase over that 6 years. Not enough for union members based upon some of the profits being made.
Union members want what amounts to just shy of 10% increase every single year over the course of 6 years.
So that $5.
That's about $5. And neither side has specifically said, here's the dollar and cents that we've offered. They've kind of alluded to these things, but there is a gulf between the two sides in addition to the automation talks as well. Both of these sides have not offered a lot of public information. USMX been very tight-lipped. The ILA's kind of firebrand-ish. Their union president, a guy by the name of Doggett, was a young longshoreman in 1977, the last time they went to strike. He was there. He's part of it. He sounds like he's prepared as well.
Yeah, and you know, USMX, they've received some outreach here from the White House in the last couple of days as far as like having some conversation. The president urging both sides to come back to the negotiation table to hopefully move this thing across the finish line. But again, no movement here because in just a matter of hours, by all accounts, we are expecting a strike here at 12:01.
Yeah, strike. The union kind of alluded to the message yesterday, saying basically it's happening.
Yeah.
Just wait for it. I believe the ILA offered their last statement as well. Let's see what they have to say.
All right, let's see if we can pull this up here. This coming out of North Bergen, New Jersey. Here we go. It says, we continue to pledge to never let our brave American troops down for their valor and service, and we will proudly continue to work all military shipments beyond October 1st, even if we are engaged in a strike. And that was an interesting thing to specifically point out, because when you talk about all of this freight commodity, rarely would you think this also impacts our military members.
They have vowed military shipments, cruise traffic here, as this notes as well, passenger ships will be unaffected as well. It's container traffic at the ports only.
Yeah, and you know, the president for the union there, Daggett, he also served in the U.S. Navy and saw combat during the Vietnam War. So this is something that certainly hits close to home for him as well. But I think it's also, if you're a union leader and you are a, speaking for your union, certainly that is a leg that you would like to stand on, because again, this is something that we love our military men and women. And, you're trying to send the message that this is the right thing to do because we are a respectable organization looking to just get our piece of the pie, so to speak.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the effect of this, because the numbers are kind of nebulous. I want to go to Dr. John Martin. He's a port transportation economist. He's in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, joining us via Zoom. We spoke on the phone a little bit earlier today, and he specifically and pointedly said, don't ask me for specific dollars and cents because it's different in every place that you look. So let's get him on the imagery here. Dr. Martin, are you there? Dr. Martin, this is Houston. Can you hear us? Not quite ready.
All right, we'll get to him here.
Yes. Meantime, some of the Skyfox video we saw of the Port of Houston.
Yes.
The Bayport terminal, the Barber's Cut terminal. It's at the far end of Highway 225, right there on the east side of Highway 146. It's where all the container traffic happens. It's a busy, busy place right now. A mad dash to get cargo that's there on a truck and on its way to a customer, so that at the stroke of midnight it doesn't get stuck there, because once they strike, it's not going anywhere.
Yeah. And you know, it's going to be interesting. I would love to get into some insight here from our economists coming up, because those companies that have that freight just kind of idle sitting there at the ports now, you know, obviously that's going to drive up the prices, but how long is it going to take them to start to do that? Are we looking at a week into this strike potentially? The prices will increase. So if there was a timeline to where the average consumer at home would really start to feel the impacts there in their pocketbooks.
So I'm told about 90% of the trucking companies out here are small businesses, less than 20 trucks. A couple of big players that work there. I spoke to one of them, Gulf Coast Trucking. Story Conrad was the person who spoke with me. Yeah. She offers some insight into that particular issue. Okay. Let's listen to Story.
I have got customers who are calling me desperate to get their containers out of the port because they don't want anything sitting come Monday at midnight or 7 p.m. on Monday whenever the port closes. I also have export customers who we've loaded boxes for this week who are telling me, do not turn these containers into the port, because they don't want their freight, their commodities stuck inside the port for whoever knows how long. And so we've got customers that are, you know, leave our boxes on your yard, or even take them to your warehouse, strip them so that the commodity, at least we know where the commodity is. If we need to truck it to the West Coast, we'll do that. But it's desperation right now at this point to just hold on to commodities as long as possible.
So it's not just your business taking things back and forth, but it's your customers who are, it sounds like, really concerned about what happens to them and their goods and services in the interim.
Oh yeah, because no one knows how long this is going to last. I mean, we could be sitting still for 2 days. We could be for 2 weeks. And commodities are so precious that for them to be stuck, there's other options within Houston. That's what I love about it. It's so diverse, right? We can put it on a rail and send it over here. We can put it on the back of a truck and haul it somewhere. So the main thing is just keeping product at arm's reach. Every business is different. I mean, here in Houston, we're so diverse in our companies. I mean, you have your larger companies who have 200 plus trucks. You've got your smaller ones that have 10 trucks. And we really saw this kind of blow up post the pandemic. There was so much freight that needed to be moved and served that everyone was starting a trucking company and getting things moving. And so I think our fear is for these smaller mom and pop shops, how long can they sustain no work? Because if there's no trucks moving in and out of the port, there's no money being made. And so how much reserve do companies have to sustain just sitting? You almost can't prepare for it, honestly. All I know is it's going to be devastating financially for all of us involved, even the ILA workers that are going to be picketing come Tuesday morning. We are all going to feel the impacts of this.
And just to wrap up the effect of this, the backlog once a strike happens. If they're off for 1 week, Story Conrad says it'll take mid-November before they get back on track. If they're off for 2 weeks, it'll be into 2025 before they're able to undo the backlog.
Yeah, so that means Christmas gifts. You know, you try to look towards
potentially,
the holiday. Yeah. Potentially, all of that will be impacted by this as well. So this is a very important topic that will continue to impact lots of people. And Tom, really quickly here, the White House Why is the White House not getting involved? What would people like to see from them?
It's a Taft-Hartley Act. It's basically the president can force these people back. The president does not want to, this close to an election day, upset labor. He wants them to have an opportunity to do this rather than enforcing this 80-day deal, and he doesn't want it to go so long that it pisses everybody else off. So that's where we're at. So I would expect a week to 2 weeks if it happens.
All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us.